Is Starfield good or bad? The reviews are in, as are the reactions. Also, over the past few days alone, we've seen the release of over 300 different mods. So whether you want to add DLSS support to Starfield or you want to make your characters nude, there's something for you. Those are well worth checking out. To start with then, we're going to jump over to OpenCritic, where we can see the aggregate score that Starfield has received so far. And as you can see, this is sitting at a very respectable 88%. Now, one thing I want to make very clear here is that throughout this video, I'm going to talk about reviews and reactions from the mainstream gaming press, but I'm not yet going to be talking about the reactions from players as a whole. And there's one very specific reason for that. So far, only early access is available. The vast majority of players are going to be getting hands-on with Starfield from the 6th of September onwards. So I'm going to wait for that to see generally what the reception is and what the reactions are. And checking out those reviews on Steam come that time is going to be very interesting indeed. Now, and my personal opinion on that is we're very likely going to see a very broad spectrum of different opinions and views over on those Steam reviews. So that's going to be interesting. But it's something I'm going to save for another video. Obviously, we can't talk about something that hasn't happened yet. But something we can talk about is today's sponsor. This is Nexus War Civilizations. Imagine a universe where PCs are lost to black holes and consoles are spacebound. One just might be tempted by mobile games. Enter Nexus War Civilization, a beacon in a mobile world of limited choices. Four factions battle for supremacy: the biotech humans, glowing Thea, mechanical Eisen, and the resourceful Oku. The game boasts a diverse roster of characters. Dante, with his unmatched power, is a highlight, but Ven, with their distinct skill set, demands attention too. Amidst the battles, heroes carry towers as profound as space, boasting surprising abilities. And for the thrill seekers, there's the gacha system. Engage in fierce battles, confront mighty bosses, and forge alliances. Dive deep into the game's vibrant social scene and chat with allies and strategize together. And for the thinkers, a galaxy of tactics beckons. For those of you brave enough to venture into the mobile gaming cosmos, check out the links in the video description, where the first 100 of you can find a KOL exclusive code worth $100. Coming back to OpenCritic then, on Starfield is sitting at a very respectable 88%, and this, for people who aren't sure, is an aggregate score pulled in from all of the mainstream gaming press. So these are all the big websites that have scored the game so far. Also, 94% of all critics are recommending that Starfield is actually a decent game. They're recommending that people pick it up. Obviously, not all websites actually score games. People like Polygon and Rock Paper Shotgun are unscored, so they can't form the part of the aggregate score here. But as we come down, we can see Games Radar, Destructoid, IGN Spain. We'll come back to IGN again in a moment. That's an entirely different conversation. We're scoring 10 out of 10, Game Rant 5 out of 5, and yes, we're getting some very good scores here for Starfield. As we move further down, we can see some slightly lower scores, so scores in the 80% range, and 4s out of 5, 8s out of 10, very respectable still. And it's only when we get down to the bottom section of the reviews that we find people scoring 7 out of 10 and 3.5 out of 5 and so on. So no one is giving terrible scores to Starfield, but a fair few people feel that Starfield is perhaps somewhat of an average game. Let's have a look at what the score is over on Metacritic, and we can see it is exactly the same, 88. Now, the difference between OpenCritic and Metacritic is that Metacritic tends to lend a heavier weight to the bigger websites, whereas OpenCritic, I believe, treats all websites equally. Either way though, both come down at an 88% score, at least for the PC reviews, and 87% on the Xbox. Now, I mentioned IGN earlier. Astronautics over on the subreddit for Starfield has gathered together the different scores for Starfield by IGN. And that that IGN score of 7 out of 10 really does stand out to me, because everywhere else, IGN France, Brazil, Japan, Spain, so on, have all scored the game around about 9 out of 10 or even higher. So the 7 out of 10 for IGN really does stand out. And with that in mind, I really do think it's worthwhile spending a few moments here to take a closer look at the IGN review. I'm not going to read the full review, but I will take a look at the verdict. I'll read that out to you. It's never a great sign when someone recommends a game on the grounds that it gets good after more than a dozen hours. A quick aside here, that's pretty much what I've been saying to a lot of people as well. Starfield gets very good after about 10 hours or so. Whether or not that's a problem for you is going to be subjective. Personally, I don't think that is a problem, but obviously the reviewer here feels that it is an issue. They continue, but that's very much the kind of game Starfield is, and I do recommend it. There are a lot of forces working against it, and the combination of disjointed space travel, non-existent maps, aggravating inventory management, and a slow rollout of essential abilities very nearly did it in. It was the joys of piloting a custom spaceship into and out of all sorts of morally ambiguous situations in a rich sci-fi universe that eventually pulled it out of the nosedive. I'm glad that I powered through the early hours because its interstellar mystery story pays off, and once the ball got rolling, combat on foot and in space gradually became good enough that its momentum carried me into the New Game Plus. After I'd finished the main story after around 60 hours, like Skyrim and Fallout 4 before it, there's still an immense amount of quality role-playing quests and interesting NPCs out there, waiting to be stumbled across, and the pull to seek it out is strong. So it's kind of a weird verdict, I guess, at least from my point of view, because the criticisms that the reviewer has kind of seem to dissipate the more that they play. So yeah, if you haven't got much patience for some of the issues here, some of the loading screens, some of the inventory management, and some of the rather dull parts of the gameplay, then I think perhaps we could say that the IGN review makes a lot of fairly valid points. But that said, it is a subjective opinion and not one that I entirely agree with. So that's the opinion of the mainstream gaming press. Personally speaking, when it comes to the critics, mainstream critics, I tend not to pay really any attention to them. Very rarely in fact, but I know a lot of people do pay attention to them, and it's interesting nonetheless to see that Starfield is getting a very respectable score. Now, I am aware that the comments on the YouTube videos and on Reddit do seem to be very mixed from the player base. A lot of this seems to come down to the loading screen and transitions, as well as the typical Bethesda bugs. But this is something, like I say, we're going to talk about a little bit later on. Meanwhile, it seems that a lot of people are enjoying Starfield, and if we head on over to Steam charts, or actually Steam database, we can see that there is a significant number of people playing. As of this recording, at 206,000 people in the game, we've had a 24-hour peak of 236,000 people, so very close to 250,000 players. And if we have a look here, we can see that Friday night, 234,000 players. Friday at launch, is that? Yeah, Friday morning, 234,000 players. By the time we get to a Friday evening, over here in the UK, I assume UTC, 217,000 players, and that increased for last night. So we're not seeing any dips in player numbers, at least not yet. That does seem to suggest that Starfield has so far at least been received very well by the people who have actually played it. In other news then, let's move on to mods. Bethesda games are famous for their mods. It's one of the reasons that Skyrim is still very heavily played nearly 12 years after its release. The modding community has kept that game alive and well. In fact, if we have a very quick look here, where are we? We can see that Skyrim has got over 60,000 mods available for it. So yeah, a whole lot of different ways to mod that game. Starfield, meanwhile, is off to a very good start. Already this week, 307 different mods for the game, and these include a whole variety of different things. Yeah, the obvious things you would expect as well. One of the big mods, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to be interested in trying, especially people with an NVIDIA graphics card, is Starfield Upscaler. Now, this isn't the only mod that adds in DLSS support. There are a few other mods for that as well, but one way or the other, I suspect NVIDIA graphics card users are going to want to give this a try. I haven't actually tried it myself just yet. It's something I do want to try out. But based on what I've seen here, it looks like it's very easy to install and very easy to use. And if Starfield Upscaler doesn't work for you, there are 2 other Starfield DLSS mods. We've got DLSS Downloader and the Starfield FSR2 Bridge, which replaces FSR2 with DLSS. So these effectively all do the same thing. If you can't get one working, it's probably well worth trying the other. What else have we got? Now this one is something I'm particularly interested in trying out. This is called Smooth Interface. And by the way, something I should actually point out here, that all of these mods currently only are available for the PC version. If you're playing on Xbox, you won't be able to use these mods just yet. But official mod support is probably just around the corner. We're going to need to await the release of the creation kit software, which will allow modders to really get to hand with the game. And once that's available, I suspect we're going to see a lot of console mods as well. Meanwhile, though, these are only available on PC at the moment. At any rate, one of the mods I'm quite interested in trying out is this one, Smooth Interface. And you may have noticed that if you're playing on PC and if you're getting higher frame rates, around about 60 frames a second or more, that the cursor and the interface nonetheless animates much slower. It tends to run at 30 frames a second. And this is something that goes all the way back to Skyrim. It's a bit of an issue with Bethesda games. Nonetheless, this mod, Smooth Interface, fixes that and gives you 60 frames per second in the UI. So yeah, something I'm definitely going to try out because I've noticed that the performance of the UI isn't the best, especially if you're getting higher frame rates. Another mod that stood out to me is this one, no more zoomed in dialogue. My personal opinion of the dialogue is that it's not the best written. Something that we've all come to expect, I think, from Bethesda titles. Their writing isn't their strong suit, but nonetheless, that really does have a bit of emphasis when the camera is zoomed right in on all the NPCs who are actually talking. So this mod zooms that out a little bit, so this would be the default view when you're actually in the discussions, and I think this is going to be a little bit better, at least for my tastes. And finally, this one here, not safe for work mod, as to be expected. They just had to be some of the first mods to make an appearance, didn't they? So that gives us a little bit of a summary as to how things stand right now with both reviews as well as player numbers and mod releases. We'll be coming back to take a closer look at this toward the end of next week as more players have their hands on with Starfield. Meanwhile, what do you think about the game so far? Either if you've played it or even if you haven't played it, what's your opinion based on what you've seen on videos? As always, thanks for watching. I'll catch you guys and girls next time.